First of all, how much of an achievement is it to get these two sides even sitting down together after they refused to do so for such a long time?
Well, it's a huge achievement. As you say, this is really one of the first times that this is happening. And of course, it needs to happen if there is any form of peace transition in Afghanistan. While symbolically it is hugely significant, whether that significance transfers from the symbolic realm to the real on-the-ground peace is quite another question.
Quite. And shockingly, an average 50 people die a day in the Afghan conflict. How hopeful are you that the violence will be reduced, if not stopped entirely, as a result of these talks?
Well, one hopes that there will be some reduction in violence, and that figure that you rightly point out is low because the February agreement between the Taliban and the US government actually restricted or got the Taliban to restrict its operations in urban areas and against the coalition forces and so on. So what we're seeing is not as bad as it could be or has been in the past. So in the future, these talks could and probably would attempt to limit the sort of conflict that we're seeing, the civilians being caught up in the crossfire. But the problem we have, of course, is that whilst the US and the Taliban have a common interest, and that interest is the withdrawal of American and other forces from soil, the Afghan government and the Taliban don't have a common interest. In fact, in some ways, they have divergent interests. The government wants to survive, and the Taliban want to succeed in taking over power. And that's where these talks will be very difficult, and that's where the Americans will put pressure to bear on the government. And so you've got a slightly asymmetric relationship, and whatever deal that comes out of it will reflect the rising power and influence of the Taliban and the reducing power and influence of the Afghan government, which is likely to lead to an unstable agreement.
And the prospect of the Taliban gaining or regaining power in Afghanistan has made many people very nervous, notably women. If the Taliban do get back into power, will girls still be able to go to school in Afghanistan? Will women be able to work outside the home?
Well, the Taliban have constantly said that they have no problems with girls going to school. What they have said is that they would expect the females to adopt whatever their version of Islamic Sharia is. And of course, that is fairly vague. The one thing that I think we do need to think about is if there is a problem with female emancipation in Afghanistan, actually that would be a problem in a relatively good situation, because that would suggest that the Taliban have control over the country and that they are administrating things. What I think we're going to get as a result of these agreements is some sort of partition in the country where the Taliban will probably take control of central and southern Afghanistan, and the current government and its allies will probably retreat to the northern areas, rather similar to the situation that existed just before 9/11. And what we will have is far more serious problems, and that is the continuation possibly of a conflict zone where women, children, the elderly, the vulnerable who pay the price of this conflict will continue to pay the price of the conflict. So that, I think, is the worry that we need to think about. If we have an issue with female emancipation, females being allowed to contribute to society beyond mere simple education, I think we will be in a relatively good situation if we discuss that problem. And if that is the case, then the current leadership within the Taliban will be amenable to a certain degree of pressure and a certain degree of influence from the outside world, because what they want is recognition. They want sanctions to go because they need the aid and the involvement of the international community. For those reasons, I think they will be amenable to some sort of influence in the area of female emancipation. I think that's a discussion to be had much later, because I think there will be many roadblocks in the way until we get there.
Professor